Thank you very much, Hody. Hi, my name is Linda, and I'm an alcoholic. It's really good to be here. Zoom is an interesting character. It allows us to travel all over, but it is different from how I was raised in Alcoholics Anonymous. But it's been really just exciting to watch Alcoholics Anonymous embrace the changes of the world and just adapt and overcome. I mean, talk about life on life's terms. That's a big deal. I want to thank Ollie for asking me. Theresa, I haven't seen her yet on the screen, but I'm sure she's here somewhere. That's the challenging thing with Zoom. You can't see everybody, and but it's super good to be here. I'm here to talk about step 8 and 9. Step 8 made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And step 9 made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And it's interesting with step 8, I've heard different people talk about, separating their amends into not now, not ever, maybe, and I'm willing to do these. And my sponsor pointed out to me, okay, I'm looking at myself, so I'm just going to remove this. Sorry. My sponsor pointed out to me that step 8 said made a list of all persons that we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. That didn't mean that I get to pick and choose. Like if I wanted to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous, I had to be willing to make all my amends. And I had some very, very difficult amends. I'm just going to briefly tell you what my life looked like when I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're new to AA, you can have a point of identification. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't think I belonged here. I wasn't an alcoholic. I listened to your stories and I thought if I got as bad as you, I'll check myself into AA. But I got this, like I've got my life together. And what my life looked like when I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is I had a 15-year-old son that was being arrested on a weekly basis. I had another 15-year-old stepson that was stealing cars, beating up on people. I had a 17-year-old stepdaughter pregnant with twins. My daughter was 10, attempting suicide. And my husband had been barricaded in the bedroom for the last 2.5 months with the doors and the windows screwed shut with a loaded semi-automatic rifle. And my life wasn't as bad as yours. And I believed that when I walked in. So I can tell you that I had a lot of wreckage to clean up. I did a tremendous amount of damage. And my sponsor told me I didn't have the luxury to pick and choose who I would be willing to make amends to. That as I did my 4th step, and I was honest with my 4th step, I wrote, my sponsor was very smart. I wrote all the 4th step stuff down, and I told her when I got to the 5th step, I was going to rip out those things that I didn't want to tell her. And she just said, okay, that's fine. And I'm super grateful that she did, because that gave me the freedom to write everything down. So when I got to making my list, I made my list as I was doing my 5th step with my sponsor. That's, that's how the big book talks about. And pretty much everyone that was on my 4th step that I talked about in my 5th step I had to make amends to. And some of those amends I didn't understand. Some of those amends I just followed direction, because it took me a while in Alcoholics Anonymous to realize the severity of my harm. I recently was at a meeting and a gentleman was sharing about, just damage that he did to his kids. And that reminded me that when I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought my daughter was retarded. And I don't talk to anyone about it. I don't take her to the doctor because they're going to ask me a lot of questions about me. And I don't want to tell them about me. So I don't have her be seen. I don't investigate it. Like, then I have to be responsible. And that's really not in my vocabulary. And one day I come home from the job that I worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week to try and control my drinking. And my daughter is talking to the babysitter. And I walk into the house and I say to the babysitter, how are you talking to my daughter? She's retarded. Like, she doesn't speak. And the babysitter looked at me like I had grown 3 heads, and she said to me, your daughter speaks Spanish. And I didn't speak any Spanish at that time in my life. But that's what I brought to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, that gentleman sharing a few weeks ago reminded me of the, that ripple effect of the damage that our lives have done. My daughter is grown up now. She's married. She recently went into counseling because she was having difficulties with her husband. And she would talk to me about it, and she would tell me, like, this is your fault because of the things that you did to me when I was growing up. Like, this is costing me my marriage. And my daughter was right. And at that point in time, I had to go back to become willing to make amends. And I had to continue to make amends to her. And I'm 22 years sober, but it doesn't stop. Like, I have to continue as I'm shown the wreckage that I have created not only affected her, but it also has now affected her husband. And I'm grateful for that. In the 12 and 12, it talks about step 8 and 9 are concerned with personal relationships. And it goes on to say that this is a tall order to clean up that stuff. I mean, I was really, really afraid. I had stolen from a lot of people. I had lied to a lot of people. I had cheated on every man that I had been with. I probably slept with, I didn't really have friends, but if you had the misfortune of hanging around with me, I probably was inappropriate with your husband. And my sponsor said that if I didn't want to continue that behavior, that I had to go back and make all that right. And it was difficult to even look at it. When I wrote my 4-step, I wrote my 4-step in pieces because I was so afraid to put that stuff down on a piece of paper. So I could just make one entry every couple days. So when I got to my 5th step, I told my sponsor, we're going to go hike back into the mountains because I know the AA police is going to arrest me. And she agreed, which I'm grateful for. And we went way back in the mountains, and no AA police came and arrested me, which I'm also grateful for. But I walked out of that mountain with a long list on step 8. And one of the, I'm just going to talk about practical experiences on step 8 and 9. I'm going to give you examples. One of my financial amends I had to make is I stole from every company I worked for. And when I talked to my first sponsor, she told me that it was not beneficial for me to go back and tell those people that I stole from them because it put me and my children at jeopardy. And so she had me donate that money to charity. And I followed direction. And I got through the steps, and I'll tell you that I didn't feel free. And so I said, I went and found a new sponsor, and she had me go through the steps again. And when I got to that part, she said to me, it wasn't charity's money. It was those companies that you stole from, and you still owe those companies their money. And I said to her, well, I've already paid the money back. And she said, then you're going to pay it back twice, or you're not going to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how it works. And I'll tell you that I told you like a tiny snippet of what my story was, and I was too afraid not to follow my sponsor's direction because I absolutely wanted to keep my seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I called those companies and I set up appointments because that's what AA has taught me to do. And then I called my girlfriend because when I got sober here in AA, you told me to get friends and you told me I'm a girl, so I should get girlfriends. And so that's what I did. And I called my girlfriend and I said to her, my sponsor says that I have to go and make amends to this company, and I know that they're going to arrest me. So I'm going to leave my ATM card in my car. This is where it's going to be at. And I'll probably get arrested and go to this jail, go to the bank, get money out with my ATM card, and come bail me out because I'm not interested in spending time in jail now that I'm sober. And she thought that was a great idea. She was the same length of sobriety as I was. I didn't tell my sponsor that's what I was doing. And my friend was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I sat in my car. I showed up to that appointment early. And I sat in my car and I said a prayer. And what I heard was God say to me, you know, you're lying and cheating and conning still. And I guarantee if you leave that ATM card in this car, you're going to go to jail. And so I hit a surrender at that point. And I said, all right, God, if I'm going to go to jail, then give me someone to do 12-step work. Because the one thing that Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me is when I'm thinking about you, I can't be thinking about me. And there lies my solution to no matter what is going on. And I took that ATM back in my wallet and I went in there and I told them that I stole from them, and they had no idea. Like I was a good, hard-working employee, except for the fact that I would steal from you. Now, they made me tell them how I did it so they could stop it from happening again. And they didn't arrest me. They didn't have me arrested. They were absolutely astounded at the fact that I would be willing to come back and take responsibility and tell the truth. And I'll tell you that I am a high school dropout. I am still a high school dropout. And I had an executive job in Los Angeles that I got when I was, I think a year sober. I'd have to think about the dates to know for sure. And I got paid a lot of money at that job. And that man treated me with a lot of respect. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that if I wasn't willing to make that amends that I made, that wouldn't have happened. You know, that man let me run his multi-million-dollar corporation for the last 19 years. And I don't know how that happens, except, you know, working the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I'll tell you, even at his job, I remember one time I did an auction and I was counting cash, and that little obsession kicks in, and I like cash. I like the way it feels. I like the way it smells. I like how it multiplies. And I'm counting that cash, and I start thinking about that Harley I have in the garage. And then all of a sudden I start thinking about, this man doesn't pay me enough, and he's not grateful for what he has. And I need more chrome for that Harley. And he paid me a bonus last Christmas, but it wasn't big enough. And my mind is starting to go off as I hit the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 mark. I'm stealing this money. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous training, you have taught me that it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what I do. And what I did is I counted that money, and I'm in the Harley store, and I'm buying chrome, and I'm thinking about all the things I'm going to spend on this. And I tuck that money in an envelope. I seal it. I open the safe door. I drop it down the slot. I close the door. And then I wake up. And I'm like, you dummy. You were supposed to steal that money. But that's Alcoholics Anonymous at work. In spite of how I'm thinking and feeling, your training has taught me just put the money in the safe. And that's a direct result of doing step 8 and 9. And, I tell those stories because maybe you got sober and you got perfect. And if that is the case for you, I'm super happy for you. But it's not the case for me. I still will struggle with my character defects. But Alcoholics Anonymous, again, reminds me constantly, it doesn't matter what's in here. What matters is what I do. And today I live a life that I cannot believe the life that I live. And I know that is because I went back and I cleaned up things. Another amends that was super important for me was the amends I made to my father. Now, my father, I blamed him for a lot of things. He had a very heavy hand when I was growing up. And I would have told you that was why I drank and used the way I drank and used. And when I was 15 years old, that's when I started using, and I kind of went off the deep end. I became a high school dropout. I ran away from home. And I remember one time my brother came to the place where I was staying, and he said to me, Mom's got a gun to her head. You have to come home. And I said to my brother, well, she could just shoot herself because I'm not coming home. And I had absolutely no feelings about that. I felt completely justified in what I was thinking and feeling. And, fast forward and I get sober, and all of a sudden I start to see things differently. And I start to see how I stole my parents' opportunity to see me graduate from high school. And I stole their opportunity to see me go to college and be successful in life. I stole a lot of opportunities from them, and I had to make that right. One thing that always bothered me is I never went back and asked my parents for things after I left home at 16, but one time I needed tires for my car, so I asked to borrow the money from my dad, and I never paid him back. And when I made the amends to him, he wouldn't take his money. And my sponsor said that I needed to respect his wishes. But I'll tell you that my relationship with my father was always kind of difficult. He just was, I would have said he was a hard man. And he got sick with cancer. And he called me and he said, I need you, kid. And my first reaction was shock, because my father never said he needed anything. And then because of Alcoholics Anonymous training, I said, okay. And I lived in Los Angeles at the time, and my dad lived in Las Vegas. And so every month I drove to Las Vegas on Thursday night, and I took my dad to the doctor's on Friday, and then I drove home on Sunday night to go back to my job. And it was very difficult. My father was not happy about me being there. And he was not happy about the fact that I had to take care of him. And what Alcoholics Anonymous had taught me was this wasn't about me. And as I watched my father through your eyes, what I got to see was a man who didn't like himself, was a man who blamed himself for his children's difficulties. Me and my brothers are alcoholics, who felt that he was responsible for how we turned out. And what I got to do is make a decision. And I'll tell you, it wasn't an easy decision. Father reverted back to some abusive techniques, and I reverted back to accepting them. And I would call the people in LA, my friends down in LA, and I would ask them, what do I do? And they would say to me, you have to tell him he can't treat you like that. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I remember my dad's heavy hand, and I feel that again. And so I made a decision to love my father like we love the newcomers of Alcoholics Anonymous, no matter what he did or said. And he had a lot to say and do. And I spent a lot of time walking around the block crying. And at the end of my father's life, he laid in a hospital bed in his living room. And he said to me, get in the bed with me. And I thought to myself, there's no way I'm getting in the bed with this man. And I heard God say it will be all right. And I crawled into the bed with my father. And he asked me to lay his head on his shoulder. And I did that. And he put his arm around me like a father would put his arm around a newborn baby. And my father passed away like that. And what happened for me that night is I knew without a shadow of a doubt that my father felt my love for him, like Alcoholics Anonymous loves the newcomer. But what shocked me most of all is I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I felt my father's love for me. And I was 15, 16 years sober. And it had taken me that long to make that relationship right. And my sponsor tells me that if I have difficult relationships in my life, it's up to me to do something about it. I can't wait for the other person to do something. I need to do something. And one of my most painful and greatest learning lessons is my son. He's 39 years old, and I dragged that kid through my alcoholism. I had him when I was, I think, 17. I thought I was a good mom because he could sleep next to the live band and not wake up. I gave that boy no stability at all in his life. And he paid a high price for that. Not only does he suffer from alcoholism, but he suffers from mental illness. And I spent a long time making amends to him. And I remember telling my sponsor when I was newer in sobriety that if he would just get sober, we could be okay. And my sponsor would tell me that it's up to you to make the change. And my son was like 18, 19 years old. He went into his first mental institution. And I went to visit him every week. And, from the time my son was 15 until pretty much now, he's been either homeless or institutionalized. He's had 7 suicide attempts. And at that time, I was planning a trip across America on my motorcycle. And I was sharing this story with my son because that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me to do, is share my life with those about me. And my son dug into his pocket. Now, he's in a mental institution. he digs into his pocket and he hands me a $5 bill. And he says to me, Mom, I'm really proud of you. And I want you to give this money to your charity. I was raising money for charity. And I knew at that moment that I had leveled the playing field with my son, that whether he let me off the hook or not, I knew I had made amends to him, or so I thought. Now, I continued on to make amends to my son, and it's been difficult. A few years ago, my son pointed a shotgun at me and him shot himself, and then we had a 6-hour standoff with the SWAT team. And because of 8 and 9, I got to go back and look at what was my part in that and where did I need to make more amends. And I did that, and we've had a tough journey, my son and I. And on Thanksgiving of last year, he got arrested for arson, and he's looking at 17 years in prison. And a few years ago, because it just wasn't safe for me anymore in LA, my sponsor and I decided that I needed to leave Los Angeles. And I left that executive job and I sold that house and I went into hiding. My son does not know my address. And I do still talk to him on the phone, though, because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't tell my son that, I gave up my life for you. I had to make all these changes for you. I left my corporate job because of you. What I do is I listen to him. And he talks about how he's working the steps with his cellie. Or this kid came in and he took him under his wing and showed him the ropes and kept him safe in jail. And I don't know what's true and what's not. But what I say to my son is, I'm proud of you. And I do that because that's step 8 and 9 for me. I have to continue to make right what I've done wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to give him my address, but it does mean that I'm going to continue to make right my wrongs. Now, I'm going to end in my last 5 minutes with my little girl. My little girl moved to Colorado when she was deciding to go to college. And just the fact that she graduated high school was a miracle. And that's a result of Alcoholics Anonymous and cleaning up the wreckage. The kind of mother that I was is I just left my daughter on her own. When I was sober, I remember she joined gymnastics. And she was going to her first class, and I was afraid. And we pulled up to the gymnasium, and I'm sitting there waiting for her to get out of the car. And she looked at me and she said, aren't you going to come in with me? And I said to her, no, go on, you'll be all right. And she was a little tiny girl. But I was so afraid. I knew nothing about gymnastics. I knew nothing about being a mom. I knew nothing. I was only about 1.5 years sober. And I remember talking to my sponsor about that, and she would tell me, like, you have to go with your daughter. And I moved to Colorado. I think it's probably been 1.5 years now. I had a stroke, and my daughter brought me here. And in this last 1.5 years, her and her husband lost their job because of COVID. They got pregnant, and she lost the baby. Their little blind dog died. Her cat died, and she was having a very rough time. And I went over there one day and I said, come on, get up, go get in the shower. We're going to go out. And I dragged her about for a couple months. And at the end of that month, she said to me, thanks, Mom, for being a mom. Thanks for continuing to realize that you made wreckage and that you still have amends to make. Because I don't think I could have made it through this if you hadn't helped me. And that is a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous teaching me to continue to look for my wrongs, to continue to see where I need to make things right. And I'm so grateful for that. I live a different life today because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I recently got hired by the police department here to be a victim advocate. I don't know how that happens for an alcoholic of my variety. I had to take a polygraph. I didn't lie on that polygraph even though I wanted to. And the truth is I'm a really good victim advocate because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to go to murder scenes and suicide scenes and child abuse scenes, and I get to help the victims that are left behind. And the reason why I get to do that is because Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to clean up my past so I can walk into there free and help those people without dragging my luggage along. That's a miracle. My whole life is a miracle today. It may not look like what I think it should look like, but I'll tell you this. Alcoholics Anonymous has made me into the very thing I have never, ever wanted to be, a lady. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Wow. And now I'll call upon Theresa.
All right, I made it. Hi, everyone. My name is Theresa. I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be here. Grateful to be sober because of a loving God. I'm breathing. That was a lot of multitasking. Okay. Whew. Just breathing for a second. Thank you so much, Linda. I didn't get a chance to introduce you. But I listened to you the whole time. Had you in my ear. And I want to begin by saying why I've always appreciated you is just a direct representation of the miracles that happen in Alcoholics Anonymous and our willingness to do the work. What happens, right? What is the result of that? And I guess I'm going to start with this because as I was listening to Linda, it brought this up for me now. I know I'm an alcoholic. I don't know if it's the Al-Anon in me, but I was thinking about, those of you who don't know, my mother's in recovery. Mommy has 34 years. And when you were talking about your children, I remember Mommy was sober 4 years before I got sober. And I remember coming out to California and she took me, I like ballet. Most people don't know, I love ballet. She took me to a ballet. And then afterwards, we were by a fountain. It's like a dream. But I remember we went to the fountain in the middle of whatever this theater was. And I remember her being very uncomfortable. And it seemed difficult. And she made her amends. I did not walk away feeling fulfilled in any way. My knee-jerk reaction was, that's just great. I'm glad you think you're doing something. But with all the damage that you have done to me in my life, you telling me about it is not going to make a difference. I don't remember telling her what she can do to amend the harm. That's a trip. So I just always remember, it's just funny, me making amends and somebody making amends to me, especially when I was still drinking and using, it just didn't matter. Whatever they were saying didn't matter. And I don't know if that makes a difference when I think about when I go out and make amends, that am I really looking for their forgiveness? Am I looking for them to acknowledge what I'm doing? What I remember as a result of the experience with Mom was that I'm taking the action that's necessary to solidify my recovery. Because if anything, I walked away seeing that that was Mom's objective. Because I didn't see how she was going to be able to repair all that damage. So I don't know, that stood out to me when I was listening to Linda. And so I'm sure she went on trying to make a living amends, but that was short-lived too. So there goes that. So ultimately, she did what she needed to do, but it didn't really change too much about me and her and what we did in our life. Until I came into recovery and found that it was necessary to solidify my sobriety. And so I love the way Linda unpacked the power behind the amends and the freedom that we gain as a result of it. And that's what I heard from her, that as scary as it was, as fearful as it is, this is something that is essential in order for us to recover. And what I find interesting about 9, this is what I go, this is my story and I'm sticking to it. You know, I always say the answer to one step is in the very next step. And so the answer to the prayer that I did in 7 is what I began to see the results of in 8 and 9. Because I humbly offered myself to God to remove good and bad, to relieve me of the bondage of self. It was the action that I took in 8 by making the list and then going out to do it is where I supported the prayer that I had just made. In the big book, it says faith without works is dead. And that's what brings me to 8, because now I'm about to take some more action to support this journey that I've agreed to have with a power greater than me. That if I continue to do this work, I become further and further away from the possibility of needing to turn to alcohol to resolve my problems in my life. And so I'm on a journey, right? For me, the steps is a process of being on a journey to uncover, discover, and discard anything and everything that stands in the way of my usefulness to me. Anything that blocks me from the sunlight of the spirit. I've had some people say, I'm not willing to make amends. I don't want to make amends. Then I usually invite them to go back to step 1. I'm like, because somewhere in here, we might be confused as to the objective of 9. The objective is so that the miracle that happens is that sanity will return and I won't have to drink again. So if that means that I got to knock on doors, I got to do something that's uncomfortable, I got to tell you what I did, then I was willing to do it, whether it made sense or not, whether I liked the idea or not. A lot of people struggle with steps 4 and steps 5. I've always struggled with 9. It's a very humbling experience. But what I do find in 9 is that I'm telling you, this is my experience when I first did it. I prayed and I asked God to remove the list that I made of my defects of character, which was dishonest, self-righteous, judgmental, arrogant, self-seeking, self-centered. And I experienced those defects of character being adjusted when I made amends. I don't believe there will be any way that I can go in front of someone and tell them exactly where I was at fault, where I was to blame, what I had did to them if I was still dishonest. There is no way I was going to go and sit across someone that I had caused harm and been just as thorough and clear without humiliating, without belittling, without bringing up their issues, without bringing up the harm they caused me, if I didn't witness the self-righteousness, the arrogance being removed. And so my experience with 9 was a deeper relationship with this God that I was seeking. It seemed as though everything that you had invited me to ask this new power, I saw it happen. It's so, you told me to pray and ask for the obsession to be removed. That didn't make sense to me, but I did it. And you know what happened? One day, I don't know when, I noticed that I wasn't obsessing over drinking anymore. You told me to write down these things and to pray for fear to be removed, and I started outgrowing it. I don't know. It wasn't engulfing me as it did before. I prayed and asked for my defects of character to be removed, and I knocked on doors and told people, here is where I was at fault and here is where I harmed you. I don't know, you guys. I was blown away. It's like the proof is in the pudding. I really got to see how this program works. The 3 that stand out for me the most, I was thinking about this, were 1, I always talk about Maria Collado. I didn't know what amends I needed to make to her until I got to that. And eventually I finally found her. And I remember that I was upset that she called me stupid, but I forgot that I had hit her. That's why. And she was the one person that I couldn't find until I finally went to a reunion and I found her. And what I found interesting was this. A, it was odd to me that her name came up because it wasn't something that was on my mind all the time. B, that I acknowledged that, oh my God, I had something to do with her calling me stupid because I hit her. And I went to make amends to her. And what she told me was, what's interesting is that the day that you hit me, You used to wear an arrowhead bracelet. I forgot I used to always have an arrowhead bracelet. When you hit me, that marking of the arrowhead, I still have. So whatever I did to her, thinking that it was 20, and grammar school, she remained with the scar of that. And that just blew me away, like how God works for me to go back and do something thinking it's nothing, it's minute, it doesn't mean anything, but yet I left this woman with a scar back in grammar school. Fascinated me. The other biggest one that I did was to Jose. Now, interesting enough, most of the people on my list were my perpetrators and my abusers. I am an abusee. I am an alcoholic, okay? But I'm an abusee. And let me tell you what that means to me. I didn't make a lot of waves. I didn't bother people. I didn't tear up their lives. I didn't take anything from them. I didn't rob them of their dignity and integrity. I didn't do any of that because I'm an abusee. An abusee doesn't go around beating up people. I don't go around hurting people. I keep my mouth shut. I try to make sure I cross the T's and dot the I's. I do anything and everything, whether it's to hold you hostage, let you hold me hostage so that you can love me. And so I had to go and make amends to people because what I would do is I would character assassinate them later. I would choose them specifically for being dysfunctional so that I can satisfy my dysfunction. And then I would turn around and play the victim. And so I had to start taking ownership of my behavior in this particular set. Because when I came to you, I lived in a state of victim consciousness. Everybody's out to get me. Everybody has harmed me. And what I began to notice through the work that we do around here was that I had a huge role to play in all that the older that I got. And so Jose was the biggest one for me. I was terrified of him. He held me hostage for 3 years, held me in what I call in the tower, and he would beat me every day. I'm on this thing. Hold on, I'm looking at myself. Hey, you look kind of cute. What's up? Okay, take me out of here. Hold on, I'm sorry. That was weird. I can't take myself off of this thing. Okay. Okay. So I can't take myself off. I gotta look at myself. I don't like it. All right. So let me do this. I don't know. Okay. So I went with Kim. So the first amends that I had to make, I had to go back to New York. So I had my list and I went back to New York and Kim came with me so I wouldn't go back alone. And when I walked into the park where he's usually hanging out at, immediately I got scared because I was wearing the clothes I shouldn't be wearing. I was smoking and I'm not supposed to be smoking. I had on makeup. I'm not supposed to wear makeup. All the rules that he used to have, I was completely contrary to all the rules that I had been tortured behind. And I panicked. And I remember Kim and I was with my girlfriend Tita. We did the serenity prayer. And I walked in and I saw him and those eyes, his eyes are piercing. They're just terrifying, his eyes. And I stood in front of him and all I remember was I had index cards. So it's not in the big book. I just know that my sponsor gave me to write it in index cards so that I wouldn't lose focus on when I was making my amends. And I held my index card and I read from it. And I shared with him that I didn't have a right to character assassinate him. I didn't have a right to blame him for what happened to me because I chose him specifically when I went with him. I knew he was an abuser. He had 3 women in the hospital. I still wanted to go with him anyway. And so I went through my list. And when I was done, I don't remember exactly what he said other than it wasn't my fault. He was a bad person. He shouldn't have harmed me. I remember that. There was nothing that I needed to do to amend the harm that I had caused. And what stood out to me, this was like we have those spiritual experiences, you know, those snapshots, those moments. That was a pivotal moment that changed my life. I turned around when I was done talking to him. And I turned around and I walked away. I still get emotional about it today. And at no time as I was walking away was I petrified that he was going to come behind me and beat the living daylights out of me. I would have never turned my back on him, ever. And I felt like I became a woman in that moment. I just walked away. I wasn't saying, don't look back. Everything's going to be okay. You're safe. I didn't feel nothing. There was a nothingness that came over me. And I knew this program works. I have been terrified of this man my entire life, since the day I ran away and I got away from him. I lived in hiding. And immediately that just fell for me. I was no longer in hiding. I no longer had to walk with my head down, and I no longer had to panic if I saw him or somebody who looked like him. I'll always remember that. I knew the program works and that there's a God, that you guys were telling the truth. My other biggest amends, I don't want to run out of time. The other one that's the biggest one was with Mom. And I know I remain willing. The big book tells me don't ever say never. Always remain willing. And I remain willing. But man, I had a hard time with that one. I had a hard time with Mama. But I knew it took me 9 years to make amends to my mother. 9. I knew that if I did not, I would never be free. I would never be free from the bondage of self. My perception will continue to be distorted. I will never be able to see the world the way I need to see the world, because I'll still be blinded by all the pain and all the suffering and the sorrow that I carried in my heart behind the dynamic. And I couldn't see really where I was at fault. I still blamed her. I still blamed her for all that she had done to me. And I remember I went to Montana to sit with some elders, and I told them I need to work this out. I have to make amends to my mother, but I'm struggling. I'm struggling. I can't see how. And she told me a story, and I don't have time to tell you the story, but she told me a story about the queen of the upper world and the queen of the underworld. And when we were done, I remember looking at her going, that's a very cute story. Thank you. And it didn't hit me till the next morning. And the next morning, I got what she was saying. I called my mother and I told her I needed to talk to her. And when I got back from Montana, I went to see my mother. Now, at this time, my mother knew that I had been in the program for a minute. 9 years I was with you. And all this time working with her sponsor, she expected that one day I was going to come to her and tell her that I want nothing to do with her ever again. I finally concluded that I do not need her as a person in my life, and I am done with her. Instead, she had no idea that I was coming to make amends. And the amends I needed to make to my mother was that it was arrogant of me to think that she should be something other than who she was. For I had not walked in her shoes. I do not know the depth of her pain. And I came to cry for her. And I wanted to know what it was that I can do. And my mother started shaking. Mommy started shaking and trembling, and she just started crying because she thought that I would just get rid of her forever. And that changed my life that day too. I began to mature spiritually. This little girl was no longer looking for mommy to be mommy and to, and to show up in my life. And it just transformed. Now, mommy and I didn't dance into the tulips, and we didn't become the BFFs and the best of friends, but she became my greatest teacher. I began to now look at her and to learn from her the things that still block me. She's the only one that can nitpick and, and kind of get to me the things that are still unresolved inside of me. She's the only one that can bring it out. She's my best teacher. And I've tested it. So whenever it comes out of me and I work on it, it never comes up again. So I find it interesting. The gift of amends that I find that I've received is nothingness. It is the sense of complete detachment, an emotional detachment from this baggage, from this bag of rocks. Talk about drop the rock, right? Have you ever talked about character defects? From the baggage that we carry around, all the secrets that I carry. God forbid you ever see me. God forbid you ever remember. Lord knows I don't want you to know all the things that I've done or really who I am. Step 9 is an invitation to be free from the bondage of self. And why am I in bondage? Because I'm trying to hold on to these things that, God forbid, I don't want the world to see. And I wear all these masks and all these disguises so that I can hide from the truth about who I am. And that begins to dispel for me. All those outfits and those costumes and all those pretenses begin to dissolve because I'm cleaning house. I'm cleaning house and I'm taking ownership. Many of us have spent many times saying, I'm sorry, and doing it again. What I came to understand is amends is like a hole in a sock. When you amend that hole, when you sew it together, there is no longer a hole. So the hole that I had inside of me, the hole that lived in me, that kept me blocked from the sunlight of the spirit, every amends that I made, it began to sew that hole back together again and sew it together again and made me whole and made me complete. And I'm no longer walking with a cloud over my head or with my head down or turning my eye or turning around. I could now, and it talks about look at you in the eye. And that when I go to make amends, it's not saying I'm sorry. Most of the people that we need to make amends to, they already know the harm that we've caused them. It's not a secret, but they never heard it come out of my mouth. They never heard me specifically say to them, I did this, 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 and that. I was wrong for doing it. What is it that I can do to amend the harm that I've caused you? That's a whole other level. We talk about spiritual maturity, you guys. Look, they remind me, be willing to go to any lengths. Remember, they prepared me in 6 and 7. This separates the boys from the men, the girls from the ladies. You better put on your big girl panties because we're about to rock and roll. And I was willing to go to any lengths. I don't want to drink again. And I haven't. You have not lied to me. I watch myself stand taller. I watch my head come up. I no longer saw myself as a piece of junk or garbage or nothing and broken and nasty. I began to watch as God chiseled me into this woman as a result of cleaning house. And it ain't just 8 and 9. So far, it's 1 through 9. There's more. There's more. I'm grateful I made amends to my brother. I always held him accountable to what he did and how he treated me. My brother beat me every day and called me every name in the book. He hated me. He hated me, my brother. And at no time did I ever consider that he was affected by the same household that I was in. I put expectations on him to be something else, to do something else, when he grew up in the same dysfunctional, insane home that I did. And I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to change the lenses. These steps, what they've done is they've given me another perspective. All the narratives and the lies that I have said to myself so that I could stay spiritually sick begins to be dismantled as a result of these steps. And it brings about compassion, forgiveness, understanding. And I'm grateful because as a result of that, I got to build a relationship with my brother in today. We no longer were living in yesterday. And that right before I had to put him on life support, the doctor said to him, is there anything you want to say to your sister before we put you on the machine? And he said, I love you. And I said, I love you too. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And I had to decide to take him off that machine. And I did it with a clean house. I was grateful that I was present in his life and his sister in today. So what step 9 does is allows me to be in today. If I have to pay back something, if I have to tell you something, it brings me in present time. What is the 4th dimension? Time. A place I had never been. I no longer have to live in yesterday. I don't have to live in tomorrow. I can live in today because my house is clean. And now I'm willing to do whatever is necessary today to clean house so I could be free. We talk about happy, joyous, and free. How is that supposed to happen? Just supposed to happen through osmosis? Action and more action. Faith without works is dead. And there's going to require more action. The gifts are beyond explanation. If you knew you haven't gotten there yet, don't worry about it. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Focus on the step that you're working on. Don't trip. Don't worry about what people did and what they had to do and might have to go to jail. Don't worry about any of that. Because we're on a different basis, a basis of trusting and relying on God. And that is the process of these steps. I'm no longer relying on Theresa. I'm not driven by 100 forms of fear. I'm putting one hand in God and one hand in this program and seeing what happens. And it's been powerful. It's been awkward, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful. But overall, it's been powerful. As Linda shared, the woman she is today is a direct result of these steps. And I watch it in her and I see her and I admire her and I respect that. That's what I respect around here. The people who do that kind of work, because I see the results and the miracles in their lives. And I want what they have, so I'm willing to do it. So thank you for your patience with me. Linda, I heard you. I couldn't have my camera on. I was in the hospital. I made it just in time. God worked everything out for me to get home just in time. And I'm looking forward to the question. Yeah, I didn't see my 5-minute thing, Ali. I don't know. How much time do I have? I wanted to make sure I got a couple more things to say if I got time. No more time?
You got 7 minutes.
I got 7 minutes. Okay. So there's a couple more amends I want to talk about. Man, most of my amends are challenging. And I want to share this because there's a lot of voices in Alcoholics Anonymous. And not everyone is a terror in someone's life. Not everyone wreaks havoc in other people's lives. That's not my experience. I had to be willing to take a look at this area of amends to see exactly where I was at fault, even to all the people who caused me harm. There's a lot of us in these rooms that have come from abuse, abandonment, neglect, called names, ostracized, pushed aside. And alcohol made it okay. But in order for me to live free, I can't rely on alcohol to make it okay anymore. It was these steps that was going to guarantee me a relationship with a power greater than them, alcohol, drugs, that was going to make it okay. I think, although it was powerful, I found it difficult, but I was willing to go to any lengths, even with the people who harmed me and never said they were sorry to me. And as a result, I have been the caregiver to most of my perpetrators and my abusers. Now, most people assume because I take care of these people, I'm doing a living amends. I'm not doing no living amends. I'm doing for them what was never done to me. I find something that's very interesting. It was in Toronto, Canada. I forgot his name. He was taking me to the airport and I was giving mommy directions. I used to walk around on the camera to give her directions, right, on taking medicine and eating food and all that stuff. And he said to me, how interesting that is, that your mother is making amends to you. I was like, well, that's an interesting perspective. That you're taking care of your mother, a woman who never took care of you, tried to kill you, abandoned you, hated you, mistreated you, and you take care of her. She's making amends to you. What a perception. I love people in AA. I'm like, how do you see that? I'm doing God's assignment. I never even considered that. She now has to rely on you to feed her, clothe her, bathe her. That's vulnerable. She's in a position of being vulnerable and trusting that you will care for her. Wow, you guys. What? I remember my uncle. I took care of my uncle and he was so mean. And people will say that's because he's dying. He had 3 to 6 months to live. And that's because he's dying. I'm like, he's always been an asshole. This is not because he's dying. I've been dealing with this my whole life. Just like mommy, I'm like, that's not nothing new. And I went downstairs and I started praying and praying. And it was like, what is it that I have unfinished business with him? What am I doing here, God? And I was still trying to get him to love me. I was still crossing the T's and dotting the I's, doing somersaults, everything possible for him to love me. And my amends to him was that I was no longer requiring that he love me. That I was no longer going to compromise my morals and my values so that he loved me. I was no longer going to pressure him to be the uncle that I think he needed to be in order to show up for me. And on his dying bed, I said, I want my name taken off of everything. I'm no longer his advance directive. I don't want power of attorney. I don't want anything. I said, you're probably going to die alone and miserable, and it's not my fault. I love you, but I no longer require you to love me. What can I do to amend the harm that I've caused you? And he said, I don't think I caused you any harm. Thank you. And you've always harmed me because you're a miserable person, and God forbid that you were ever born. I said, okay. My uncle went to Puerto Rico. They ended up calling me. They asked me if he could come back and if I could take care of him before he died. And my uncle spent the next 31 days with me. And what I agreed to do is I agreed to cross the T's and dot the I's on all the paperwork. I agreed to do all the spiritual work. But I also agreed that I will not hold his hand and I will not be available emotionally for him. And I held up to that. He finally told me what I can do was to just make sure that he died with dignity and with grace and with respect. And I met up to that responsibility, but I felt the freedom. I felt nothing. I had a nothingness. I had a nothingness when I watched my uncle take his last breath. To me, step 9 is coming to a place of nothingness. There's a difference between I feel nothing, I don't want nothing to do with you, I'm done with you, with a spiritual nothingness. That's what step 9 has done for me. It got rid of the garbage. It got rid of the garbage and kept me from no longer being blocked from the sunlight of the spirit. And then I just watched that light shine, man. I watched my light just glow and get brighter and brighter. So if you're hesitant, if anybody's out there hesitant on 9, just make a list. Talk with your sponsor. Make sure that whatever you do, you don't cause more harm. And then just watch. Just watch. I always say I get in the passenger seat and I let God start driving and show off and show out. So thank you for allowing me to share, and I'm excited to hear questions.
The eyes, come on up, please.
Hi, Leah, alcoholic. What do you do if you owe amends to someone that doesn't want to talk to you? Like they don't want contact, but you owe them amends, but you don't want to disrespect the fact that they don't want to talk to you. Like, what do you do then?
So are we supposed to just answer?
Yes, ma'am. You can go ahead and go first.
So it's been my experience that I need to respect that they don't want to hear from me, and that the universe will put an opportunity in my life to make the amends. It won't be direct, but I will be able to clean up my past. Theresa?
The same here. And you know, I've had that experience. There was a boyfriend that I had, James, and I went to make amends and he didn't want anything to do with me. His dad came to the door, and his dad was in AA and told me he didn't want to see me. He didn't want to talk to me. And I just remained willing should it ever occur again. You know what I mean? Like, should our paths cross or something happen? I'm always willing to make amends. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to hunt them down. Sometimes I share that with sponsees, where it's like we spend so many years. I was just telling a sponsee that the other day. She was upset that somebody wouldn't see her or talk to her. And I'm like, when did you do that harm? She was like, 20 years ago. I'm like, you did it 20 years ago. Now, 20 years later, you're like, you need to hear my amends. I'm like, only alcoholics do stuff like that. It's like, 20 years ago, you caused harm. And now you insist that they talk to you now to hear your amends. I'm like, oh my gosh. Pray for God to remove the selfishness and the self-centeredness on that one. And I just remain willing. So, yeah, I can't hunt people down and make amends. That would be causing more harm. I just respect them.
Thank you for your question. Lisa, come on up, please.
Hi, I'm alcoholic. My name is Lisa. And Theresa, I was really struck, like you really struck, wow, I wanted to know more when you talked about being the victim. And I know with the amends I need to make, even doing the steps again with my kids and leaving me or mom keep drinking. And it's no, it's mom, we know, the life you're leading, we're proud of you. And yeah, you touched on something with, I put myself, there's a lot of victim areas that because I can sense having blame. I got sober and then got divorced. When you said about not having apologies or being mistreated by my mom, I can sense the dysfunction. And so I can tolerate it, but how do you process that where you got that freedom? Where I'd like to know how to put myself in the area where I need to make an amend, because I'm willing to do that for that freedom. I just don't know how to do that. And you, the way you explained it, it's like, wow, there's a gold nugget there. How did you do that? So.
How did I make amends from being a victim? I mean, I was a victim in most of my cases. So about 90, I would say about 90% of my amends, my first amends I made, were my perpetrators and abusers.
Okay.
And it was because I wanted freedom.
Yes.
There's a paragraph, right, that talks about we squander the hours. People had the ability to kill. It seemed as though if I didn't do this, they were still going to rent space in my spirit and in my mind. And I was the one spiritually sick as a result of it. And so I was willing to be thorough on where I was at fault and where I was to blame and not condoning any behavior, because I'm real quick to, I grew up with, it was always my fault why I got a beating, right? So I know how to take fault for everything, okay? I take it even unreasonably. I mean, I have my sponsors that had to tell me that's not your fault. Like, you need to stop. You know what I mean? You didn't do that because you beat me, and then I go, oh my God, what could I have done better? You know what I'm saying? That's just my initial knee-jerk reaction. And so I can't just not be a victim anymore. I just got to keep doing the steps as they're outlined, and then I just watch myself no longer being in a state of victim consciousness. And so I'm just willing to specifically look at where I'm at fault and owning that. That's what I'm willing to do. And real quick, I know you had talked about being a mom. It's just interesting. Sometimes I've watched mothers or my own mother just live with this guilt, you know what I'm saying, of all her behavior. And I spent most of my years really upset because mommy was she was blaming everything on everything. And so I had to make amends also to her for robbing her of whatever that was she was going through. Do you know what I mean? Like, she couldn't let that go. And it was just irritating my brother and I. Every few minutes, it had everything to do with her damage. You know what I mean? You're like, what can we do to put an end to this? So I had to stop doing that and just let her be, because I felt victimized by her, whatever she had going on.
Thank you, Lisa. Marion P., come on up, please.
Hey, Ali, thank you so much. Theresa and Linda, thank you both so much. I have a question for Theresa, directly, kind of, sort of. My abusers are my family members, two of whom have passed. And I guess it's two questions. I don't know how to do it and have that freedom without doing it face to face. It just, I've been sober for a few days, and so I did it once the first time I got here, and it's like renting space. I keep kicking them out, and it's like pests. You kick them out and it keeps coming back. And so I'm doing the 4-step now again, a different way with my sponsor. And I don't know how to do this, where I just, I really want to forgive them, but I can feel the anger still inside. And, like sometimes you could toast a marshmallow over it, it's like, and I just, what do I do, Theresa?
I think also Linda can speak to it. Even though Linda shared her stuff, Linda has had her share.
Okay.
And I definitely would like her to speak on this too. But you know what? I like to keep it really simple. And all I had to do was to continue to work the steps to the best of my ability. My sponsor told me I got sober when I was 24. So it took 24 years of that stuff. It's not an overnight matter. So as long as I remain willing, it's almost like chipping away. I think it was Ali the other day. Picture a rock, that with a chisel and a hammer. They say like God's chiseling us into our authentic self, like sculpting us. But I was like, but have you ever heard a rock while it's being chiseled? It's probably going, ouch, ugh, And so that's just me and my little vivid mind. So if anything, what I've done is I'm gentle with myself in a sense that I'm not trying to get it all at one time. I'm willing. I continue to do writing. I get direction from sponsor, from other people's experiences, like asking questions. And I also don't try to be in 9 when I'm in 4. You know what I mean? So just like be in 4 because you're in 4. And then when you get to 9, you'll be in 9. Remember, it took me 9 years to make amends to my mother. 9 years. But I remained willing and I kept doing the work. So I know Linda's got some stuff on that.
I'm just going to leave it there, Theresa. You had a lot of good stuff to say. Marion directly asked for your input, so I'm going to leave it right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Lynn, come on up, please.
Okay, hi, Lynn Alcoholic. Sorry, I'm just in the car here. Thanks, you guys. Really, really enjoyed that. I don't know if I'm on small. Anyway, I have a burst blood vessel in my eye, so if it looks weird, it is. I was wondering, that was so good. I was wondering I have a situation with family where I was getting ready. I got a new sponsor this year on Zoom and got to my amends and some long-standing stuff that I wanted to do with family, extended family, my husband's daughters. And during COVID, we stayed locked down for a really long time. We were extra safe because he's older and compromised. They kind of did the opposite. And I think I was ready to make amends and weird stuff started happening where it was almost like the hostility grew without anything actually happening. And so my sponsor has said, I'm sorry, this is a long question. My sponsor had said, maybe hold off on making the amends because there's so much hostility. I don't have time to go into it. More hostility than the pre-COVID, even though nothing really happened. And maybe start to act better, before you make the amends. So in other words, get together and start to act better and be more outgoing and all that. And then we'll make the amends. But I can't get together with them now, and they're not even seeing their dad, which is very unusual. So it's become this situation where I don't know whether to walk into really hostile settings that don't really have a basis and try to make amends, or to continue to wait and try to see if there's a way to get together because things seem to be okay when we actually see each other. If that's really confusing, I'm sorry. I'm just not quite sure how to progress on this.
Take it
So-
away, Linda.
I'm just going to tell you a very quick story. My input to you is do what your sponsor says. I got involved with someone I didn't know. I moved in with him. I didn't tell my sponsor. I lied about it. When I finally told my sponsor, he moved out and then he killed himself. So it's just my experience that when we want our will, when we want it our way, it's always an incredibly dangerous situation, not only for us, but those we come in contact with. So if your sponsor says leave it, that's what I would suggest that you do.
Thank you for your question. Jerry, come on up, please. Jerry going once, twice. Jerry, you good?
Hi. Sorry about that. I was just trying to get out the noise. Theresa, Linda, thank you very much for your guys' share. Really, really powerful. Had a question though. Linda, you were saying something about you continue to make amends. I got a 33-year-old son who's full-blown alcoholic, admittedly, you know what I mean? And he tends to tell me what he really thinks about me when he's drinking. And, you know, so he's very rarely drawing a sober breath. And he keeps saying to me, though, that I never made amends to him, right? And it's kind of making me feel a certain kind of way. So when you said that you are constantly making amends to him, what exactly did you mean?
Well, sometimes my amends is I don't answer the phone. If I'm not in good fit spiritual position, I don't talk to him. When he's homeless and I know he's out of his mind, I don't answer the phone. Because Jerry, the truth is, I'm not that spiritually fit that I can step into the cage with the gorilla and be okay. So sometimes the amends is just to keep my mouth shut and keep out of the way and just say prayers for him.
Thank you, Jerry. And the last question, Connie, come on up, please.
Hi, my name is Connie, and I'm really grateful I came tonight. I live in Illinois, and so wonderful things, spiritual things have been happening in my life. I'm 11 years sober after a 5-year relapse from being 13 years sober. So I know I don't have another recovery in me. And so I'm trying to, become willing to make all of the amends that I can make amends. I never thought that I would be making amends to my perpetrators. My first perpetrator was my father's. He's no longer alive. But then I continued in that victim cycle for many years.
Connie, do you have a question?
Yeah. The question is that how do I go about making amends to my fiance? I have a 24-year-old son, and I just recently, since the age of 8, I didn't see him until last year. And his dad, took him out of state. He kidnapped him. And how do I make amends to his dad? Because I carry a lot of resentment, because he took him away from me.
I'm gonna let Linda, hopefully this is our last question, so hopefully the both of us can, I didn't have to figure out how to make amends to anybody. Certainly if you're new or you're in it for a while, I think that's the beauty of working with others. Like, all I have to do is make a list of what I believe is an amends, the air of people I can reach, people I can't reach, people I'm confused about. Like, I get to make a list. And then the awesome thing is I get to sit across somebody. Like, thank God we're not all crazy on the same day, right? I get to sit across somebody else who's far more sane than I am and not emotionally attached to what I got going on. And they can give me a certain clarity and perspective, as I do when I work with others, is I have them call me with their list, and then we go through it together. And we break that down in a way that, we don't lead with the chin, it says, right? I don't put myself in harm. I don't harm my family. I just work with someone, so I don't have to figure out how to make amends. I think that's why I love this program. I don't have to figure out anything. I get to do it, talk to someone else, get some clarity, and then I take the action that's been outlined and directed for me to do. And I always remain willing. And there's some that are like living amends, they call them. Some people passed away. I could get guidance. I think it's not a cookie cutter kind of thing, and they give us examples in the big book, but every situation is also different. So sometimes that's a very ambiguous question. It's kind of hard to answer that when there's probably a whole lot more, right? So hopefully your sponsor can guide you better on how to make amends to those certain people. And I would encourage everyone to please work with someone else rather than you trying to figure out how to do it. That's my suggestion on that, Connie. You don't have to figure it out on your own. We'll do this together.
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. I'm going to second Theresa. I think that amends are very dangerous for us to go it alone, and that if we get input for those that we have respect, our sponsors and those about us, they lead us. It's also been my experience that I've done some amends and not found freedom. And what has happened is as new people have been brought into my life, they have different perspectives on how I should make amends. Because I know how I want to make amends. I'm going to burn the house to the ground. That's how I make amends. And so as those new people are brought into my life, they give suggestions. I will try the amends again. If I don't get free, I keep looking. But the Big Book talks about that. This is a spiritual program, and it's dangerous for us to go alone. And even those who are the greatest spiritual leaders seek direction and input.